Well, happy Tuesday morning, everyone. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I appreciate you being with me. And by the way, thank you so very, very much for all of you who have responded to me privately and made comments on YouTube, etc., as I am answering in depth Dr. David Hester's 23 arguments that he presented in rapid style in his very first affirmative speech. As I've pointed out repeatedly, the form and the structure of his first affirmative was, the purpose of it, quite frankly, was to simply overwhelm me and the audience, realizing and knowing I would not have substantive time to give to every single one of his 23 arguments. I've shared with you before, folks. Look, this is really nothing but a debater's trick. Again, it's intended to overwhelm your opponent and not give him sufficient time to answer every single argument so that then you can get back up and say, oh, look, my opponent didn't answer my arguments. Well, again, folks, I emphasize this is a debater's trick. Serious debate is the presentation of an argument carefully constructed, substantive in form, logically oriented, and exegetically based. Instead of simply getting up and saying, as Dr. Hester did in his argument number 6, the Bible says Jesus would come with the sound of a trumpet. Preston, when did Jesus come with the sound of a trumpet? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the simple answer to that, based upon Matthew chapter 24, 29 through 31 is, as Jesus said, in a text that Dr. David Hester himself acknowledges was fulfilled in AD 70. All right, do you catch the power of that? Immediately after the tribulation of those days, said Jesus, the sun shall be darkened, the moon shall not give its light, the stars of heaven shall be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, or then they shall see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and they shall see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. He shall send forth his angels, now watch this, with the sound of the great trumpet, and they shall gather together the elect from the four winds. Well, there is the coming of the Lord with the sound of the trumpet. Now, Dr. Hester appealed to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Christ would come with the sound of a trumpet. So my question to Dr. Hester, my question for you, my question for anyone considering Matthew 24 and 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 is this. And the question is, what is the difference between the two texts? In both texts, we have the coming of the Lord. In both texts, we have the coming on the clouds. In both texts, we have the coming with angels. In both texts, we have the sound of the trumpet. In both texts, by the way, we have the resurrection. Did you realize that Matthew 24, verse 31, is a direct echo of Isaiah 27, 13? Isaiah 27 is a resurrection text. In other words, the Lord would come at the sound of the trumpet to raise the dead. Isaiah 27. But Isaiah 27 would also be when the fortified city of Jerusalem would be desolated, the altar would be turned to a chalkstone, to chalkstone, and the people whom the Lord had created would be totally destroyed. Isaiah 27, 10 and following. What is that? That's the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. So, in Matthew 24, we have every exact constituent element that we find in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. What do we find in Matthew 24, 34? Jesus' emphatic statement, verily I say unto you, this generation will by no means pass until all of these things are fulfilled. Well, what does that include? It includes the resurrection of Isaiah. Here's your time statement of Matthew 24:34, resurrection at the sounding of the trumpet. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, brethren, those of us who are, present active indicative, alive, and those who are remaining until the coming of the Lord. Twice, Paul refers to himself and his contemporaries and says, those of us who are alive. Well, was Paul alive? He was certainly speaking to that generation. Those of us who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. So, David Hester said, Don Preston, when did Jesus come? With the sound of a trumpet? A comparison of Matthew 24 with 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 reveals that 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 contains every exact, precise constituent element as Matthew 24. David Hester applies Matthew 24 to AD 70. The hermeneutical question, therefore, is, the exegetical question, therefore, is, David Hester, what's the difference between the two texts? Look, in my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings, I adduce over 23 direct parallels between Matthew and the Olivet Discourse and Thessalonians. They are perfect and precise parallels, and they prove Christ came with the sound of the trumpet in AD 70. And we'll take a look at David Hester's argument number 6, or is it number 7, in our next installment, and you don't want to miss it. We'll see you on the flip side.